Welcome everyone to another 30-minute skills lesson, Microsoft Excel 102. Today we'll be revisiting Excel for our second of two introductory lessons on spreadsheets, how they can be used to understand data, and how you all can begin using them as a tool when you're reporting. As a reminder, links to all of our 30-minute skills lessons, including the first of this two-parter on Excel, can be found at nefac.org/30-minute skills. We have a lot to cover, not a lot of time, so returning today with us is instructor Jenifer McKim. She's Deputy Investigative Editor with the GBH News Center for Investigative Reporting. Jenifer, all yours.
Great. Thanks so much for having me. I really appreciate it. And thanks to the New England First Amendment Coalition. Last month, we looked into just a basic Excel training. So I just wanted to go over a little bit of what we did last time, and we'll be sort of using some of those skills as we move on to pivot tables. So in our last class, we learned how to add up rows and columns of data, doing basic math, summing, finding medians, averages from a set of numbers very easily. Excel and Google Sheets are both great ways to be able to do really quick data math for people who don't have to be math experts. I am an English major and have been able to do this type of work. You can really impress your editors and do quick work with data sets that you get on daily reporting. This doesn't have to be something to use as an investigative reporter, but it helps all different types of reporters do smart work. We also learned how to calculate percent change and percent of whole, and we did some sorting and filtering. So that was the beginning of what we did. Now we're going to head to pivot tables, which sort of is the next step for those who like to use spreadsheets. It sounds a little scary. It sometimes scares beginning reporters, but it's actually very easy once you learn how to use the tools. And what I really advise everybody to do is when you're doing this is to just practice it. Mostly that is the most important thing, is you can learn a skill and then practice it. Go to YouTube. There's so many different places to improve your skills, but I use pivot tables all the time to cover stories with the work I do, including housing data, trafficking, whatever it is. Basically, what do? They help you calculate, summarize, and analyze data that lets you see comparisons, patterns, and trends. You can quickly take a large data set and build summary tables from it, and basically helps you tell stories. It definitely makes you smarter. You can impress the people in your offices, in your newsrooms, that you can take this big, massive amount of numbers and quickly tell stories that way. So this is the beginning for those of you who came today, but there are many resources to help you do more if you want to become a data journalist. Some of the work that the data set that I'm using today and some of the work that we did last time came directly from a amazing data journalist, Mary Jo Webster at the Star Tribune. She has some publicly available trainings online. I included the Google site right here. If you're interested in this, there's lots of more practices that you can do that she has provided for reporters and editors, journalists interested in doing this work. There's also the Investigative Reporters and Editors organization. They have a lot of boot camps. There's resources online. You can go to their conferences, and there's all different types of data training you can do with them. And of course, there's the New England First Amendment Coalition and their institute, where there's also data training, as well as the types of things we're doing in these 30-minute trainings. So lots of places for you to go. Basically, I am always feeling like I need to refresh and learn. So if you're here for the first time, don't at all be intimidated. Think of this as something, as a way to start to understand what you can do with some simple tools online. You can use pivot tables for Excel or Google Sheets and other types of data services, but these are two of the most basic ones. There's a few differences with the way they work, but they're basically similar. Some of the things you want to think about when you're doing this type of work is you need what they like to call tidy data, which means you can't have gaps within your spreadsheets. You want to have all the labels at the top filled in, because if you don't have a label filled in, it won't be able to sum or count anything. You want to take out any gaps that there might be in the data you have. So cleaning data and examining is one of the important things to do as a data journalist. And then lastly, it's just curiosity in practice. As I said before, asking questions, considering your data is a source like anyone else, so that you are asking it questions and having it answer things. You can ask in many different ways. You can look at it and be curious and think that way. So that's what you want to do as you're looking at this data. So I want to show you a few screenshots of what pivot tables look like, and then we will go dig into some data ourselves. So this is generally, here we have a spreadsheet of some data. And then basically when you decide that you want to create a pivot table, you click into your spreadsheet. And for Excel, you click on insert, and then pivot tables will pop up, and you will find this little table that will say create a pivot table. Generally, it will be able to tell you what range that you want it in. And it will also ask you whether you want a new worksheet or existing worksheet. It usually starts at new worksheet, pick that. So basically, if you look down at the bottom, there's different sheets here. You'll get a new sheet for your worksheet. You would click OK and move on. And we'll do this in real time in a second, but I just wanted to show you the picture. And this is what you would get when you create a new worksheet. You would have here on the left where your pivot table would be created, and you would have the pivot table fields, columns, filters, rows, and values. And that way you can start basically trying to pull together summing columns in your spreadsheet to tell stories, to understand what trends and interesting information there is. So that's the basics of pivot tables. And I am going to now bring something up again, thanks to my colleague in arms, Mary Jo Webster, who does a lot of this data analysis. This is a data training that she, I am going to make it a little bigger, so hopefully you can see it, that she provided, but I think it's a great way to sort of show how to do some basic pivot tables. So what is this? This is an analysis that somebody gave to her of cartoons in the New Yorker in 2014. And basically, again, as you know, spreadsheets have columns and rows. Basically, you can see here that each of them has a label up at the top. They're looking at what issue of the New Yorker, the date of it, the page, the ethnicity of the cartoon character, and the gender, and as well as the occupation and the cartoonist, and whether they talk or not. So those are some of the questions they asked it. And basically, so you have all this data, and then you're looking at it and you're thinking, I wonder what as a journalist might be interesting to me. And as you know, journalists often were interested in racial disparity, gender disparity. And this is some interesting data that you could ask it questions as a source and say, I wonder what we can talk about. So pivot tables would be a great way to just dig in. So to start with a pivot table, you want to make sure that your cursor is in the data. And then where it is right here, you can see that my cursor is in the data because it's highlighted here. Then click on insert up at the top here. So with Google Sheets, I believe in most cases it would be under data, which is another thing, but in Excel, it's under insert. There's different places to find where a pivot table is, but there will be a place. And you can see here to the top left corner, it says pivot table. So I'm going to click on that and get that little picture that that I showed you before. So basically it's saying, okay, select a table or range. It knows that this is the range that I want to look at. I want a new worksheet. So I'm going to click OK. And up pops what is here to the left, where we're going to start creating a pivot table. And here are the fields over to the right. And also, one of the things that's really good to do with these types of things is you want to name your sheets. We have a workbook here and down below you can see you have different sheets. So the first sheet is our main sheet. So I'm going to just label that, click double down here, and I'm going to label it main sheet. And then go back to sheet 2, which is my first sheet of a pivot table. The first question I'd like to ask this data is, in terms of cartoons, what gender are they? So if you look at these fields, there's different fields here. There's rows, values where you're summing or counting, and columns. So I'm going to look at gender, and I'm going to click on this here, and I'm going to drag it down to rows. And you'll see here, suddenly it says female and male. And then I'm going to put the same thing into values. And you'll see that there are, even in cartoon characters in the New Yorker, there's more men than women. So that's sort of an interesting piece of data. And we also, let's see, I'm trying to, okay. We also learned in our last class about how we could sort things from top to bottom. It's not a lot of numbers, but I'm going to just click here, go to data, and sort it top to bottom. If there were a lot of them, you could see more, but that's still just interesting. I also want to point to, if you click here on values, if you look at count of gender, there's a little information thing. I'm going to click on that. And you'll see that there's different ways to show the numbers. It says show data as. I'm going to click on that, and it'll show different ways. So this shows us a number, but perhaps you want a percentage. So I'm going to click here, and I'm going to see percent of, if I wanted to compare it, so percent of grand total. I'm going to click on that, click OK. And you'll see that you'll be able to say really quickly that 70%, more than 70% of the cartoon characters in the New Yorker during this period were men. So there you go. And down on sheets, I want to name this because, again, I want to help the future me understand what I'm doing. So here I'm going to put gender down below, and on there I've had my first sheet. So I've had my first sort of question here. I'm going to go back to main sheets and think of something else I'd like to do. And try again for another type of pivot table. So again, this is my source. I'm going to ask it questions like I would ask anyone I interviewed. I'm going to click insert. I'm going to do pivot table. Again, I'm going to create another pivot table. You'll notice down there, sheet 3, it pops up. And now I'm curious about ethnicity. So I'm going to do a similar thing. I'm going to click on ethnicity to the right, bring it down to rows, bring another one there. See what time we have here, and see that you have basically white. There are over 1,700 white characters and 96 non-white characters. So that is another sort of interesting statistic. I also maybe will want to do the same thing I did last time in terms of sorting. So I'm going to click data. Click in the folder and click in the cell, and I'm going to go Z to A. So I'll see that, and we might want to do the same thing about percentages. The numbers look big, but what percentage is that? And another way you could do it instead of just changing that is create another one right next to it. So I drag down from ethnicity. Another one. So here is this. So now it looks just the same, but now I want to do the same percentage. So I'm going to click back over to count of ethnicity. I'm going to click on the information thing, show data as. And this time I'm going to want to look at, again, grand total. So show data as, I'll put it in here, percent of grand total. Click on that, and we'll see that almost 95% of the cartoon characters in the New Yorker at that period were white and only 5% non-white. So just a really interesting sort of story if you're looking into something, another question. So there, and then I'm going to go back down to the bottom to my worksheet and name this so the future me knows what I'm doing, and I'm going to name it ethnicity. So there we go. We have another one. I really like to advise when you have this type of data, it's just fun to ask your data questions and answer, and then see what it tells you. And then you can decide if you have a kind of story. So I'm going back to main sheets, clicking down to main sheets. I'm going to ask it another question. So here I am. I'm in the numbers. I'm going to click to insert. I'm going to click pivot table again. Do the same thing over again, and we'll get another worksheet. Now you can see we have sheet 4. We have down below gender, ethnicity. You can ask all different questions when you're looking at your data. What do you think? So this one, maybe we'll try to do columns and rows. So I'm just curious about asking myself which cartoonist does more men or women, etc. So let's try that. I'm going to click down cartoonist, and you see you have this long list down here. When you're doing spreadsheets and pivot tables, it's really good to have the longest list down this way along the columns, and the rows to be shorter. So I'm going to now check to see which ethnicity or maybe I'll start with gender. I'm going to put gender in columns. So you'll see up here, there's a female and a male in columns. Now there's 2 columns. And then I'm going to put it also in values and see what differences between cartoonists, who likes females or males more. And again, these numbers now it really helps to be able to sort our data. So I'm going to click in the grand total, click to data. I'm going to go Z to A, and I'll say, oh, geez, so this is sort of the guy who does the most cartoon characters. And then what percentage have more female or male? It might be helpful for us, again, to go to values and do percentages, just because the numbers kind of can eyeball it, but it's sort of interesting. And this time I'm going to want to do percent. They're different. You can see here different ways. So percent of row total. So let's do that and click. And you'll see, so NAF did 77%. And so you can start asking yourself questions here also about, like, I wonder which cartoonist does the most female. So I'm going to click into female, and I'm going to do a sort. And I'll see, oh, wait, all right. It should sort here. That's interesting. Let's try this way. Never mind. Well, anyway, you should click here and sort and see from top to bottom. It didn't do exactly what I wanted to, but basically you could find ways of who has the most there. There's who has the least. You can see here that some of them have no females at all. Hafiz only does male cartoonists. So these are some interesting ways to tell stories. And we'll do one last one. So this one was cartoonists. I'm going to put the name down here in the sheets. And the other thing, again, for people who are just beginning data analysis, is not to get caught up in when the things don't exactly work. It is something to kind of, not get frustrated with, play with a lot, talk to friends and experts who can help you in your newsrooms do this type of work. So we just did male, female. Let's try ethnicity as a last one, and then I'll call it a day. So, okay, so we have gender, ethnicity, cartoonist. Actually, and I should be cartoonist by, I guess I would call this cartoonist by gender. And now we're going to do click in the middle. I'm going to click insert, go up to pivot tables one more time. And I'm going to put, again, I'm going to see this. I'm going to try now to decide which cartoonist does the most non-white. cartoons, so characters. So I'm going to put the cartoonists, and then I'm going to put ethnicity here in columns. So you can see there, they're up in columns, and I'm also going to count them. And I'll see, and maybe, so, and now we'll see, let's see by non-white. And I'm wondering if, because they're not always filled in, that might be an issue with sorting. It's probably the problem. Okay, we'll see here that, oh, this one same person who had the most females had a lot of non-white cartoon characters. So you can see here, so I want to write a story about which cartoonist is the most like thinking about diversity. And you could answer it by looking at this column. I'd also go back down to sheets and name it cartoonist by ethnicity. And that's interesting. I think these are all sort of interesting stories that you can tell through pivot tables.
We have one question. Annie's asking, she's new to pivot tables, just got a huge data set that she's working with.
Okay.
And she wants to rename a list of that data to make it more tidy, to make it easier to work with. So she says, as an example, she has a list of names that are coming in all caps, last name, comma, first name, middle name. But she just wants it to say first name, last name. She wants to change, how it looks. Does she need to use, is there a way to do that? Or does she need to use the proper and concat commands first to create the columns she's looking to create?
Yeah, there's definitely a way to pull out the first and the last name through Excel. There's some great toolkits in that first thing that I sent you through Mary Jo Webster to show how you can separate by basically, yeah, exactly as you said, separate by comma the first and the last names. If you look, Annie, if you're interested, there's something called Excel Basics in that list of trainings that would give you a lot of great tips on how to do things like that. Also pulling year from month to day. I could actually do another training if you were interested on some of those basic ways to sort of tidy your data and make it easier to do pivot tables later, because it is true, the best way to analyze data is to make sure that there's only one thing in each column.
Yeah, and I should note as well, Annie, if you haven't already, check out the 30-minute skills lesson on data cleaning, and it goes over just ways to take large data sets with all different, formatting and style issues, and to clean it up and to use your word, tidy it up to make it more manageable and to make cleaner data sets with. So I would encourage you to check out that resource as well.
There's also something called Open Refine, which is a way to help journalists and other people clean up their data so they can use it for analysis.
Yep, that's right. In fact, the lesson that I just mentioned is a lesson using Open Refine. So,
oh, great. Perfect.
So great resource. Well, Jenifer, thank you. This was really helpful. Appreciate it. Anyone who's watching right now, please, if you haven't already, check out Jenifer's Microsoft Excel 101 lesson, as well as all of the database analysis classes that we have on our 30-minute skills program. Jenifer, I know you put it in the chat, but for those watching after the fact, what's the best way to get in touch with you if anyone has any follow-up questions?
Absolutely. So I'm best reached at my work email at Jenifer with one N and one F _McKim at WGBH.org. I'm also available on Twitter at JB McKim, and I'm open. We at GBH are an educational foundation, and we're always open. I love to talk to journalists about the work they're doing, whether it's data analysis or just digging in or any types of things. And I'm looking forward, Justin, to be involved with your institute this fall.
Great. No, we're happy to have you. And thank you again for providing this lesson. And thank you to all of you who joined us for this 30-minute skills. Again, if you haven't already, check out all of our previous lessons. Links to all are at nefac.org/30-minute skills. And if you find any of these lessons valuable in any way, please consider making a donation at nefac.org. Help us keep these lessons free and open to all. Thank you all again, and we'll see you next month for our next 30-minute skills.
Bye, everybody.